Good evening, everyone. Welcome back to the Bullpen Podcast. Happy Friday evening to y'all. Happy November 10th. Actually, we're kind of already halfway through November, if you can believe it or not. I am your host, Adam Kunos. You can follow me on Twitter at Kunos19. Don't forget to follow the show at the Bullpen Podcast, at the Bullpen Pod on Twitter. Also, head over to YouTube, subscribe to our YouTube channel using the Linktree link in our Twitter bio. We are sponsored by Fanatics. Head on over to Fanatics using our Linktree link in our Twitter about for all of your official 2023 World Series Championship gear, including jerseys, hats, sweatshirts, t-shirts, parade gear, and more. Your 2023 World Series Texas Rangers Championship gear officially sold by Fanatics. Once again, everyone, happy Friday evening to y'all. Welcome back to the Bullpen Podcast. I hope everyone's been having a great week so far. It has been a fantastic week down here. The weather's been absolutely gorgeous over the past weekend. We got a lot to talk about tonight. We're going to recap the 2023 World Series. We are going to go through kind of some of the manager hirings that have taken place since the season has ended. I may give you my final thoughts on the season. I may give you kind of my final word on where some of the teams I cheer for stand. So the White Sox, the Diamondbacks, the Rays, what I think they are looking at in the future, where they stand as a ball club, and what I think they need to do in order to improve into 2024 season. And we are going to look to the future of this podcast. So if you're tuning in, you're actually tuning in to the final episode of this podcast under the Bullpen Podcast. So we'll get into that a little later. But first, let's get into it, ladies and gentlemen. Let's talk the 2023 World Series. All right, I'm going to start by speaking as a fan of the Arizona Diamondbacks before I get into the stats, before I get into the analytics of the series itself. Almost. The Diamondbacks, they just did not have enough to get this series victory back to Arizona. I thought that coming off a Game 7 victory in Philadelphia, winning 2 on the road in Philly, a very tough place to win, by the way, Arizona would be riding this high momentum coming in to the World Series. I thought they matched up really well with Texas. I thought both offense, defense, and pitching kind of matched up well with the Rangers. I thought pitching, I know going up against Eovaldi was going to be a challenge. I thought when they got to Scherzer, they could have jumped on him a little more. I thought going into Game 4, where we didn't know who the Texas was going to throw out for the Game 4 starter, I thought Arizona was going to have a little more of a pop in their step, but damn, so close. But you know what? What a season for Arizona. I am supporting my Arizona World Series hat, which did come in, ironically, after the World Series. Again, nothing against Fanatics. As you can see, I got 2 new Diamondbacks hats behind me. I got the postseason hat. I got the throwback hat with the 25th anniversary patch. I am also displaying the Texas Rangers hat as they are crowned the 2023 World Series champions. But I will say this as a fan of the Diamondbacks, I have no hate for the Texas Rangers. There is no hate for that team right now. I have nothing but respect for the Texas Rangers, that organization. What they did to win that World Series, again, I have no hate to that franchise. Both these franchises came off 100 plus lost seasons in 2021, okay seasons in 2022, and defied all odds just to get to the World Series in 2023. So going into the series, my mindset was, yes, I would love to see the Diamondbacks win the World Series. I would love to see the Diamondbacks just kind of shock baseball. No one predicted they would even get to the playoffs. No one gave them a chance against Milwaukee, against LA, against Philly. I would love to see them prove everyone wrong, but unfortunately, this wasn't in the cards this round for the Diamondbacks. But again, no hate for the Texas Rangers, and we're gonna actually jump into the World Series as well as we're gonna talk World Series baseball. So let's recap the World Series, starting with Game 1. So Texas kind of got the offense going. They jumped down to a early 2-0 lead in the first, but the Diamondbacks did storm back, scoring 5 to take a 5-3 lead in the 5th inning. It was kind of holding that lead until we got to the bottom of the eighth. Bottom of the ninth when Corey Seager hit a two-run homer to tie the game. Sewald for Diamondbacks, who's been absolutely phenomenal up until the World Series, blew his first postseason save. So, I mean, he had been locked down for Diamondbacks in the bullpen in the closer role. Unfortunately, Seager did get the best of him, tied it with a 5-5, with a home run, a two-run homer to make it 5-5. And then Adios Garcia, I mean, his incredible postseason just continued as he hit a solo homer in the bottom 11th to give the Rangers a 6-5 victory, give them the Game 1 victory. Now, statistically, if you win Game 1 of the World Series, you are most likely on your way to a World Series victory. Usually, 80% of the time, if you win Game 1, you win the World Series. I mean, go back looking at the past World Series, whoever has won Game 1 has gone on to win the World Series. I mean, the Diamondbacks in 01 won Game 1 and Game 2. They go on to win the series in 7. The Red Sox in 04 won Game 1. White Sox in 05 won Game 1. Red Sox back in 07, Game 1. So you kind of see, if you go back and look at the past champions, majority of them won Game 1. So again, winning Game 1 is usually a good sign that your team's off to a good start. However, we go to Game 2, the Diamondbacks, just offense explosion. They score 7 runs between the 7th and 9th inning. I mean, they just blew open this game starting the 7th inning. You had a home run by Gabriel Morero, RBI singles by Longoria, Carroll, Marte, each driving in runs to help the Diamondbacks pour on the victory. And then Kelly for the Diamondbacks was this absolutely phenomenal amount. You talk about a guy who needed to come out and have a lockdown game. 7 innings pitched, 3 hits, 1 run, 9 Ks. I mean, that's absolutely phenomenal pitching from him during Game 2. Diamondbacks get the 9-1 victory, tie the series 1-1. So, if you're a Diamondbacks fan, you're looking at, okay, Game 2, we just took home field advantage back from the Rangers. We took home field advantage back, and now we are pretty much locked on going back to Arizona. Again, going to Arizona, you knew that Diamondbacks were going to – that place was going to be rocking. Diamondbacks fans were pumped to have this series back in Arizona. I mean, as soon as tickets went on sale for games 3, 4, and 5, completely sold out within about, I want to say, 20 minutes. I'll have to go back and double check that, but sold out completely within 20 minutes. So you can tell that Arizona was itching for this series to return it back to Phoenix. Game 3, however, did not go in favor of Diamondbacks as the Rangers walk away with the 3-1 victory. All the Rangers needed was 3 runs in the 5th inning, and that was it. It's a 3-1 victory. Rangers bullpen kind of came in lockdown with 6 innings, 8 Ks, 4 hits. Corey Seager, again, capped off the scoring with a 2-run homer. I mean, that guy was phenomenal in this series, and you're going to kind of see a little bit of a trend going with him as I talk about this World Series. Going to Game 4. I wish there was a Game 7. Going into Game 4, the Rangers, I mean, domination in 2nd inning, domination in the 3rd inning. Fielding errors by the Diamondbacks kind of spelled how this game was going to go. There was a misplay in the infield that imploded. So the Rangers score 5 in the 2nd inning, 5 in the 3rd inning, go up 10-0. Diamondbacks do chip away, so they do score 6 in the 8th and the 9th inning to make it a 11-7 game. So they weren't entirely blown out, which is something I'm actually happy with, that the Diamondbacks did fight back to make this at least a competitive game. I hate when your team gets blown out in a game and you're just watching going like, where's the effort? Where is the offense? Are they even trying right now? At least Arizona made an effort in this game. And that's something that I've liked about Arizona this entire season, is that they keep fighting no matter how down out everyone thinks they are. However, Rangers take Game 4, 11-7. And again, Diamondbacks bullpen, which has been pretty much locked on up until throughout the entire postseason, Unfortunately, that one game, they kind of imploded in this game, in my opinion, and the Rangers come away with the Game 4 victory. Game 5, okay, so a little bit of a backstory here. I had not watched, I have been not keeping a close eye on game, but I have not been watching because I get very anxious when it comes to watching playoff games that my teams are competitive in or playing in. Um, when the Ducks are in the Stanley Cup playoffs, when they get to Game 7 in either of the Stanley Cup playoff rounds, I am a nervous wreck because the Ducks have bad history with Game 7. When the White Sox were in the playoffs back in 2021, I was watching games. I was a nervous wreck. I watched pitch one up until the final pitch of this game, and to be honest, I kind of held my cool through this game the entire time. I said, okay, it's a do or die game. If the Diamondbacks lose, it's a hell of a season. If they win, perfect. We go to Game 6 in Texas, and we know what happened when the Diamondbacks won Game 5 or forced a Game 6. We know what's going to happen. So this game was a pitching duel. You talk about a game where pitching was on point. Zach Gallen for the Diamondbacks went 6 in the third inning, 3 hits, 1 run on 6 Ks. Eovaldi, on the other hand, went 6 for Texas, went 6 innings, 4 hits, 5 Ks. So these pitchers were locked on, in my opinion, on just dialing in. Gallen was hitting the zone. He was painting the corners. His breaking ball, his slider, his pitches had speed, had bite to them. He was just eating up Texas hitting the entire time. It got kind of nervous for me, I'm not gonna lie, when he got around the third time going to the Texas lineup, because going through a lineup for the third time, batters start to figure out what's going on. You start to maybe say, okay, do I need to switch up my momentum a little? Do I need to do something a little different? But the thing that got me about this game that was just so frustrating for me to watch, the Diamondbacks left so many runners in scoring position. They had so many opportunities to blow this game wide open. They left runners in scoring position in the first, second, third, fourth, fifth inning. I mean, they left the bases loaded, I believe, twice in this game. So, I mean, again, as a Diamondbacks fan, it was frustrating to see just the chances that Arizona left on the field to make this a Game 5 victory. Texas does put a run up in the 7th, and then the 9th inning comes around, and then error in the outfield kind of ends the game right there. Texas scores 4 in the 9th inning, and then they close it out with a 5-0 victory in Arizona. Rangers win the World Series 4-1, their first World Series in franchise history. The Rangers have been a franchise in Texas for 52 years, 60 years overall together if you count the time they were the Washington Senators. Corey Seager is your 2023 World Series MVP, his second World Series MVP, as he was the MVP back in the 2020 World Series with the Los Angeles Dodgers. Fun fact, he joins Reggie Jackson as the only position player to win multiple World Series MVPs, and he becomes the first player in baseball history to win the MVP while playing for the National League team, while playing for the NL and AL. So, again, I tip my hat to Corey Seager. I tip my hat to Bruce Bochy, the entire Rangers organization. Well done. You guys definitely deserve that championship. You guys had a hell of a season, and I thought it was hilarious. And when I saw this clip, I about fell out of my chair laughing my ass off that Corey Seager trolled the Houston Astros at the championship parade in Arlington. So I believe it was Kyle Tucker after Astros clinched the division, who said a lot of people were going to ask what it would be like if the Astros didn't win the division, and he said, "I guess we'll never know." Seager came back and said, a lot of people are asking what would happen if the Rangers never won the World Series. I guess we'll never know. That is a perfect troll to the Houston Astros. I know all of baseball was just absolutely floored, or not floored. I was ecstatic that Seager trolled the Houston Astros. I absolutely loved what he did with that. So Seager, if you look at his splits during the World Series, a 295 average, 402 OP, on base percentage, slugged 588, OPS of 990, 3 home runs, 6 hits, 6 runs, 3 RBIs. So, again, this is my thoughts on the World Series as a fan. I just gave you kind of the analytics, the stats of what happened during the games. My thoughts on this World Series, this was an excellent World Series. Now, the ratings prove it otherwise. This was the lowest rating World Series in baseball history for a while. I'm going to pull up the stat because there was I can't remember where I saw this, but I did post it on a Facebook group that I follow, Geeks Who Like Sports. So if you're not, I'll give a promo of this. If you're not listening to this podcast, go and follow Geeks Who Like Sports. It's an amazing podcast. They talk about not only sports, but a lot of geek stuff. But this was the lowest rated World Series since 2016. So in 2016, when it was the Cubs and Indians, the average viewership was 22.8 million fans for that entire series. So that series, a lot of people tuned in. I tuned in for every single game because it was a series that we had a team that had a 100-plus World Series drought, a team that had a 50-plus World Series drought. One of those teams was going to end a significant drought. And then you go to 2017 when it was the Astros-Dodgers, 2018 Red Sox-Dodgers, 2019 when it was the Nationals and Astros. Now, it did dip in 2020 to 9.8 million when it was the Dodgers and Rays. Obviously, the 2020 pandemic, a lot of stuff happened there, so I don't know if that would call that a fluke. You did see the viewership jump in 2021, 2022 with 11.7 million with the Braves winning over the Astros and then the Astros winning over the Phillies. 8.5 million viewers for this World Series. That is a very low turnout for this World Series, and I think what may have caused this would be the teams that were playing. You didn't have the Phillies. You didn't have the Dodgers. You didn't have the Braves. You didn't have the Astros. Baltimore got bounced in the first round. Tampa Bay got bounced in the wild card round. The teams that you wanted to see in the World Series didn't even make it past the league championship round. So you had two teams who are in very large markets. The Rangers, they're down in the Arlington, Dallas market. That is a fairly large market when you consider where they're playing in. Arizona, they're out in Phoenix. That is a fairly large viewing market. Baseball is very popular in those states. You go down, when I was down in Texas a few years ago to watch the Rangers, there was a ton of Ranger fans who went out and watched the game, even when the Rangers were losing. When we were in Arizona back in 2018, when the Diamondbacks were celebrating their 20th season, baseball was very popular there. You had a lot of people turning out for Diamondbacks games in the middle of July. So it's not like that baseball is not popular in these sports. It's just that the World Series matchup wasn't appealing to everyone. And it's sad because this World Series, I thought, was probably one of the better matchups you could have. You had a team that had been in the World Series in over 20 years. You had a team that had lost back-to-back World Series starting in 2010, 2011, who were still looking for their first championship. You had Bruce Bochy, who was coming in his first season with the Rangers. Could he repeat what he did with San Francisco in 2010, 2012, 2014? You had Torey Lovullo, who was legitimately on the hot seat, who a lot of people thought would be out of a managing job after 2021, after Diamondbacks lost 110 games. And now those teams are playing in the World Series. So I don't think this will hurt baseball in the long run, but I think that when you look at the World Series next year, there will be a significant jump in viewership. But again, I'll watch the World Series regardless of the fact we're going to be reporting on the World Series regardless of the fact. So regardless of who's playing in the World Series, we're going to be reporting it. But again, lowest rated World Series viewership-wise since 2016, but that doesn't say anything about the teams. They both had two great seasons, so that's my word. Okay. Before I jump into the manager hires, I'm just going to give you my thoughts on how this season went. Excuse me. So, this season we did have a lot of rule changes that were in play. We had the pitch clock, we had large bases, we had the no shift sign, we had only 2 pickoff attempts at first per batter. I thought that this season was probably one of the more successful baseball seasons in a very long time. You had more fans going to the games, you had more fans tuning into games throughout the entire time. Sorry that my cat is trying to get into the podcast as well. But I thought that this season players were more aggressive on base. You had Ronald Acuna Jr. steal 70 plus bases. I mean, you had a lot more offense. You had a lot more players taking risk on the bases. Overall, the rule changes helped baseball. I'm just going to say it. They helped baseball. There was not a single thing wrong with the rule changes for this season. I appreciate what Rob Manfred put in with the rule changes. I know there are more rule changes coming down the road. So I thought this season was successful. Now, if I had to nitpick, and again, very nitpicky, I would like to see challenges for balls and strike because we saw a lot of bad calls by umpires this season. Ball and strike. Now, I'm not saying that managers can challenge every ball and strike. Make it like football. You get 2 challenges. You have 2 chances to challenge a ball and strike. You win the first challenge, you get a second challenge. Kind of like you do with when they challenge the on-field, when they challenge calls on the field. That should be expanded to challenge a ball and strike. Now, again, keep the same rules. Keep the challenge. I believe if you win the first challenge, you get a second challenge. If you lose both challenges, that's it. You saw mound visits were reduced. You actually saw the pace of the game increase. When we went to the Rays White Sox game early on in the season, I mean the game went incredibly fast in person. I mean we blinked and it was the 6th inning in Tampa. It was like, wow, this game is just flying by right now, which was just unbelievable in my opinion. Overall, I thought this was a great season. I thought baseball did a great job kind of taking a step forward. Now I think there are still steps forward, that more steps they can take going forward, but we'll talk about that at a later day. But let's get into some of the manager hires. So we did have a lot of managers fired or just resigned over the offseason, and we've already had 5 spots filled. So starting out in San Francisco, Bob Melvin left San Diego. He takes over the San Francisco Giants job. Melvin, coming off the job with the Padres, took the Padres to the NLCS in 2021. The Padres did take a step backwards this past season, failing to make the playoffs. So that leaves an open spot for the Padres. I think Melvin's going to do a great job with San Francisco. He's a great manager. He's had success with the Diamondbacks, with the Athletics, now with the Padres. I think he'll be a great fit for San Francisco. The Mets, Buck Showalter is not returning as manager for the Mets. They're bringing Carlos Menzola, bench coach for the Yankees. Kind of a questionable manager hire in my opinion. I know Ray Castillo, who hosts Geeks for Life Sports, is not a fan of it. Ray, if you're listening to this podcast, I totally 100% agree with you. I'll actually back you for manager of the Mets. You'll have our backing here at the Bullpen Podcast for manager of the Mets. If you need a kind of someone to be in your corner, we will back you up on that in your corner. So very questionable call by the Mets. The Mets just went through a total collapse this season, trading off pretty much every single player that they signed over the offseason. The Angels are bringing on Ron Washington, who served as third base coach with the Braves, who was part of the 2021 World Series championship. Last manager job was with the Rangers, which included back-to-back World Series appearances in 2010 and 2011. I like this hiring for the Angels. They're bringing in an experienced manager for this team. Now, whether they have Mike Trout, Shohei Ohtani is a completely different story, but I like that Ron Washington, he brings experience, he brings postseason experience, he knows how to work with players, he knows how to coach young players, young rookies. So I think it is a great fit for him going to Anaheim. The Guardians, we all know that Dino did retire from the manager of the Guardians. He had great seasons with the Red Sox, great seasons with the Indians/Guardians. So we wish him the best in retirement. The Guardians are bringing on Stephen Vogt, who was part of the Mariners coaching staff in 2023. Now he's coming on his first managing job, so this is his first job as a manager. So we'll see how he reacts to a Guardians team that should be competitive in a fairly weak AL Central. They'll be competitive with the Twins, so we'll see how he handles that club. The Cubs made a very shocking move in not bringing back David Ross, which I thought was just a complete blindside when they made that announcement. But they kind of went to Milwaukee and snatched Craig Counsell from the Brewers, who was end of his contract, and they bring him in. They're going to make him the highest paid manager in baseball on the north side. So Counsell will take over the manager role for the Cubs. So that just leaves openings for the Brewers, the Astros, and the Padres. Dusty Baker did officially retire after the 2023 ALCS, so he did call it quits. So we wish him to get the best in his retirement. He has had such a great career as a manager. He took the Giants to the World Series. He took the Cubs to the playoffs. Took the Reds, the Nationals, and then the Astros to the playoffs. So he has had great success coaching with teams. So good for him, and good on him going forward. All right. So now I'm going to give you my final words. First of all, you can see on the screen the Texas Rangers still stings a little because I still wish that was an Arizona Diamondbacks championship logo. But again, hats off to Texas Rangers. Hell of a season. Again, hats off to both Texas and Arizona on a hell of a season. But I'm going to give you my final thoughts on three teams: the White Sox, the Diamondbacks, and the Rays. Now, I am not going to be holding anything back when I talk about one team in particular, just because there's just a lot going on with that franchise. So, you know what? No holdbacks. Let's get into it. Let me get down to my notes. Let's get into it, and let's talk about the Chicago White Sox. If you're on Twitter, I would just do a search for White Sox. Go into Twitter and search White Sox. This fan base is pissed. This fan base is upset. They let go of a ton of players in the offseason. Liam Hendriks, Tim Anderson. Two big names are not returning to the White Sox in the offseason. Mike Clevinger was released as well. Just a lot of players. They're going to have a huge turnaround in this offseason, just players that are not coming back to this White Sox. And then it was announced that Jason Benintendi will not be returning as the voice of the White Sox broadcasting. He's now going to the Tigers to be their TV broadcaster, and that kind of really hit me hard. I loved Jason Benintendi as the voice of the White Sox for NBC Sports Chicago. I loved his personality. I loved the enthusiasm that he brought to the White Sox. Jason, if you're listening to this podcast, which I hope you do, I'm going to miss you calling White Sox games on the South Side, but I look forward to watching or listen to you calling Tigers game, listening to you calling All-Star games, home run derbies, basketball, hockey, football. I look forward to when you broadcast. You are such a great broadcaster. You have such a good instinct when it comes to broadcasting. You keep it interesting for everyone. I mean, I'm just going to miss you on the South Side. I wish you nothing but the best going forward in Detroit for you and your family. But White Sox, come on. What the hell is going on in Chicago right now? I mean, No Sox Fest coming up in the wintertime, which have a lot of fans pissed. A lot of fans look forward to Sox Fest. I've tried myself when I lived in Chicago to try to get to Sox Fest. I mean, I've tried numerous times, failed to get tickets because it was so popular. There's reports that the White Sox aren't going to be spending in the offseason, which is just mind blowing. With the amount of salary that you dumped by not signing key players, it. I mean, I honestly don't know what to say right now about this franchise. I'm just so frustrated with them and just how this franchise has been run. I mean, by the leadership in this franchise. I mean, again, nothing on the players. I have nothing to say about the players. The players are only doing what they can on the field. It is the leadership of this team that has been the frustrating part. We had a championship window open up in 2021 when we won the AL Central. We had so many opportunities to just go out and get better, and they refused to spend money in the offseason. They made bad trades, they made bad free agent signings. I just I honestly don't know what to say. I don't know what to say about this franchise, and that it's going to be very hard to cheer for this franchise next season. I mean, I will put on White Sox gear when it comes to spring training. I will be very optimistic that this team is going to have a good season next year. But I say that I say that with the most cringed voice, in that the White Sox are going to be a bad franchise for the next few years. And it has to start with ownership. I think Reinsdorf needs to sell the team. I think new leadership comes in. Chris Getz is taking over as GM. I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt. I want to see what he does at the baseball winter meetings in a few weeks. I want to see what he does with free agency, what he does with the farm system, how he structures his team. Pedro Grifol, you're going into year two, my friend. Year one was awful. I'll just be real. Year one was awful. 101 losses. You have to do better managing this team. You got new coaching staff coming in. You got potentially new talent, new players coming into the clubhouse. You have to have this team locked on and ready to go from day one of spring training. Now, it's easy for me to sit here and spew all this because I am, as a podcast host, as a sports fan, it's easy for me to say, like, you need to do this, this, and this. I'm not going to say he needs to do that because he'll go out to Arizona next year and he'll do what he thinks is best for his franchise. But Sox, if the Sox don't perform next year, they're going to be out looking for blood. And I say that in respect to this franchise, they're going to be out looking for blood. Now we're going to flip to the opposite side in the Arizona Diamondbacks. I mean, defending National League champions coming in. They extended Torey Lovullo to for a few more years to 2026, which is absolutely what they needed to do. This franchise has a lot of positive things going forward. What I think they need to do, I think they need to bring back Longoria. I think they need to bring back Marrero. They need to keep that core intact because they have such a good core on the offensive side with Ketel Marte, Corbin Carroll leading the way, Christian Walker at first base. They got a good core offensive lineup. They just need a few pitchers. They need, I think, two more pitchers in the starting rotation, and need some middle bullpen help. And I think this team is back to where they were next year, or even better. I think they add those pieces to the puzzle. I think they have a great chance to not only make the playoffs next year, but win the division and potentially go back to the World Series. Now, I will say that it is very hard. It is very hard to repeat as National League, as I'll say, as league champions or as World Series champions. You saw the Phillies, who failed to repeat as National League champions. The Braves failed to repeat as World Series champions. The Dodgers failed to repeat. We have not had a repeat World Series champion since the Yankees in 99-2000. We have seen teams repeat as league champions. The Phillies in 08-09. The Rangers in 2010-2011. The Dodgers in 17-18. The Astros They were back-to-back pennant winners in 2000. Uh, shit. They were back-to-back pennant winners. 2021, 2022, and 2000. No, two times. Sorry, two times. They've made the ALCS so many times. It's hard to keep counting that franchise right now. So I think Arizona has a lot of positive outlook for this franchise. I think there's going to be a lot good going forward. I think Derek Hall has a good mindset of where this franchise needs to go. I'm excited to see where this franchise goes in the future. I'm excited to see them take the field next year. I'm excited to see opening day at Chase Field on TV, to where they raise that NL pennant, they get their league championship rings, and they celebrate such a great season. So, again, that's my thoughts on the Diamondbacks. The Tampa Bay Rays. Now, we're talking about the Rays. My wife is a huge Rays fan. Very disappointed beyond belief that they got bounced in the sweep to the eventual World Series champion Texas Rangers. But the Rays have such a unique franchise dynamic that they have one of the lowest payrolls in baseball, but yet they go out and they compete time after time after time. So, I mean, the Rays are going to be competitive next year regardless of the fact. We're looking forward to a brand new stadium down in St. Pete, down in the Gaslight district of St. Pete. So we're looking forward to a baseball stadium coming to St. Pete within the next few years. We're going to be going down to Tampa hopefully a few more times next year. We're going to try to get down to Miami a few times next year to see some games, just because we got Bright Rail that we could take the train down to Miami, which is a short trip down to Tampa down I-4. But I like the Rays. I think they will be competitive. I think they got a lot positive going forward. They could spend a little more money in the offseason. I think they should spend a little more money in the offseason, but this team is not known for spending money. They're very conservative when it comes to spending money. They're very tight as a franchise, but I think they're going to be good going forward as a franchise. They're going to be in a very tough division with Baltimore, with Toronto. New York's going to be a little better. I think Boston will try to get better in the offseason. So they're going to be playing in a very tight division, but they will be competitive. I think they will be competitive. All right, ladies and gentlemen. So as we come to the end of the show, I just want to take a moment. I have talked baseball on this podcast for the last 2.5 years. It has been an absolute pleasure coming on to you guys every Wednesday, Sunday, or whenever we've done this show to talk baseball. My host, Chris Krogman, when we started this podcast, we talked about this. We were both excited to do a baseball podcast as part of the Laundry Network. I was excited to start a podcast because I had been thinking about doing a podcast for the longest time, and when I got the opportunity, I truly enjoyed that opportunity to start the podcast. But now going forward, talking baseball this past season as a solo podcast host was fun, but it was I do miss talking with a fellow co-host. I do miss that interaction, talking with someone and kind of going back and forth the banner. So after a lot of consideration, there will be some changes coming to this podcast. So you're going to hear it first. We are going to announce that this podcast will be renamed the Mr. and Mrs. Sports Podcast. That's why I said Mr. and Mrs. Podcast. It's actually be the Mr. and Mrs. Sports Podcast. My wife is going to come on as a co-host with me, and we're going to talk not only baseball, we're going to talk football, basketball, hockey, soccer. We're going to talk Olympics. We're going to talk college sports. We're going to talk about pretty much all things sports on this podcast. We're going to throw in a little side subjects here as well, but she's going to join me as a co-host on this show. So we're going to kind of take a hiatus on this show for a while. We're going to go through some rebranding and just kind of get this up and running. We're hoping to get this show up and running maybe late December, early January, because we're going to work on a new intro. We're going to work on new logos. We are going to keep the Twitter page going. We are going to rename the Twitter page here shortly, so stay tuned for that. But we are going to talk all sports. The first episode we're going to do is a introduction episode to where we're going to talk about our favorite sports, what sports we played, and just what we love about sports in general. And then we'll get into some sports news context. So stay tuned for that. That will be coming down the line. But again, For those of you who have tuned in to our live shows here on the Bullpen Lounge, the Bullpen Podcast, have downloaded the show on Apple, Spotify, Google, Amazon, wherever you get your podcasts. I cannot say how truly grateful I am, how thankful I am that you guys have continued to show support for this podcast, how you continue to download the show. I will say one of the best highlights from this season was when we did our World Baseball Classic coverage. Just the amount of people we reached in downloads. Our downloads did spike during that time. So I appreciate the downloads. I appreciate the audience that we reach. I do love talking baseball with you guys. I'm excited to talk not only baseball, but more sports. I'm excited to talk some football as a Bears fan. Again, Chicago sports right now, Bears, a little different story than the White Sox as they're kind of going through their own struggles right now. I'm excited to talk about Chicago Bulls basketball, Anaheim Ducks hockey, Orlando City soccer. Orlando City, congrats to you guys. You're on to the semifinals, so we're going to talk some Major League Soccer. We're going to talk Premier League Soccer. We're going to talk about the Winter Olympics coming up next year. I am very excited on the direction that this podcast is going, but I just want to say thank you to everyone who was a guest on the show, who tuned into the Bullpen Podcast, who has had me on as a guest on their show. Please continue to tune in future episodes. We're still going to talk sports. We would love to have you guys back on once we get the new show up and running. But until then, signing off for the final time on the Bullpen Podcast, Adam Kunos. I thank you guys very much for tuning in for the past 2.5 years to the Bullpen Podcast. But stay tuned for the Mr. and Mrs. Sports Podcast show coming soon. We'll see you guys then. Have a good night.